Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to discuss if the low is in here for Bitcoin. We're also going to touch on Ethereum and see how that's playing out, as Ethereum now has come back down and back tested our $4,200 level. And then we're going to jump into the altcoin market, have a look at how some of our trades are playing out, and discuss some of the new coins that we have started scaling into long positions on. So lots to cover in today's video, guys. Let's jump into it. So guys, firstly I want to start with Bitcoin here and discuss the possibility that we could have seen the low for Bitcoin come in yesterday, and that the way I'm viewing Bitcoin right now is that there is three possibilities in how price action can play out, and depending on which structure ends up taking place is how I'll be moving forward for Bitcoin and the rest of the cryptocurrency market. Now, in Monday's video, we discussed the two possibilities in which Bitcoin was to break down from these levels and take out 105,000, that it was most likely we'd continue to spill down and then only really just see a 702 fib retrace on Bitcoin, which is how when the top of Bitcoin back in 2021 ended up coming in, this is how price reacted, and that during this final rally here for Bitcoin, when we did see Bitcoin come to that 702 level, is when we've seen the alt season and the majority of the altcoins actually go on to do the majority of their runs. So the most bearish scenario here is if we do see Bitcoin fall down below this $104,000 to $105,000 region, which I do think is quite unlikely. And what I am looking at playing out here is two other scenarios. Now, we'll remove the fractal here that I've pulled from 2021. This is how Bitcoin's top came in back in 21, and we'll go back and have a look at the other scenario we discussed on Monday, where it's most likely once we've seen the big flush come in, once we've seen the news event that drives price higher, those lows get swept, and then that double bottom that ends up coming back in after we see price move back up to the mid-range. That what we were looking for was Bitcoin to form this double bottom, price move up, consolidate, and then break to the upside. And that because structurally this cycle does look like it is repeating itself for the third time here, we should start to see something similar to that, where we do have the bottom come in, the news event to drive price higher, the sweep, price move back to the mid-range here, and then we end up coming in and getting that double bottom. So if price was to continue to react like it did back during the last time when Bitcoin ended up finding its bottom in similar fashion, what you did see was price move up, a flash retest, which we have seen so far, price shoots back to the upside. It should get above this $112,000 level, which is where this resistance now lies on the Bitcoin price chart. And then once we see price get above there, we should accumulate before then moving higher. And this should be a pretty fast reversal considering how late we are into the market cycle. And now the third scenario that I can also see playing out is quite similar to this one. However, structurally, it is just a little bit different. This is how price ended up playing out, and the top came in back in 2021, which is quite similar to how we've just charted. However, we would be looking for price to move higher, then back test that $112,000 region before then moving higher and back testing that level again, forming some kind of head and shoulders before then actually seeing price move to the upside. So the two scenarios I can see playing out here are quite bullish for Bitcoin, and they do actually point to the low being in. It's just a matter of seeing which structure price wants to end up taking this time, and based on that information we can trade the altcoin market. And moving over and looking at Ethereum here, we have now seen price backtest that level, which gives me more confidence that we have found the low for Bitcoin, as Ethereum has came down and found those lows. And just to keep you guys updated on how things are actually playing out on the trade, we did end up scaling into Ethereum down here at this low, and then we have just bought some more recently as far as scaling into our Ethereum trade goes, which has now brought our average entry price from about $4,400 all the way down to about $4,300. And we are going to be moving our stop loss up as well. If there is any scenario in which we do see Ethereum actually sweep these lows, it's most likely it comes back and back tests the high here at about $3,900. So for now, this is the trade that we have. And if we can see further confirmation that Ethereum ends up holding these levels, we'll continue to scale into the trade, which again, tying back to Bitcoin, structurally, this is how we would like to see Bitcoin play out and give us more confirmation that the low is in. But if the low isn't in for Ethereum here, and we do want to come down, plunge a little bit lower, take out this low, and end up back testing the top of this range here, then it is most likely that we will see another low on Bitcoin. And this green line here that we have at about 106,000 points to the fact that price could roll over at this level and can backtest this $106,000 level. However, I think this is quite unlikely, and we most likely have put in our low here, just keeping that in the back of our minds that that could be a possibility in how price plays out. So keeping the stops tight here on the Ethereum trade, as if we do see the lows get taken out again, it's most likely we do fall to this $3,900 region where we will re-enter the trade. But for now, pretty happy with how things are playing out for Ethereum, and we can move this blue line over here now that we do have our low. And what we are looking for ETH to do next is bounce back up quite aggressively, similar to how we see Bitcoin playing out here. We definitely want to see Bitcoin get above 112,000, and we definitely want to see ETH bounce back up to the mid-range and have this as the new local low. Now moving over into a few of the other altcoins, you can see that there are still clear winners here like Solana, which has held up quite well, and we've actually added to our Solana position. Looking at the trade here, guys, you can see that we did snipe the lows down there on Solana in the bottom left of your screen, and that we have just added a little bit more Solana here at this level. And if we can see more confirmation that Bitcoin is going to hold these lows and move to the upside in a moment where Bitcoin should shuffle higher and backtest, or if it wants to come up here, consolidate and then move higher, we will look to add to our Solana position and even our Ethereum position and some of the coins that are performing the strongest right now that we think will do the best during September. Another coin that has been holding up surprisingly well is also Dogecoin, and we can see that it is still above our entry level where we scaled in last Tuesday, and we're pretty happy with how things are playing out on Doge. And in the last 24 hours have actually added to our position. Now, as far as coins that haven't been performing as well, however, structurally, I do think the local low is actually XRP, and what we ended up seeing was the $2.72 low set back on the 2nd of August actually taken out. And since that low has been taken out, we have seen pretty nice bounce here on XRP, staying above the $2.65 high. However, still not writing out the fact that we could see 265 backtested, especially if Bitcoin is to take out this low that it has set right now. But moving forward on XRP, I can actually see things playing out like they did in 2021. And when deep diving back on the Bitcoin and XRP chart, I did find something quite interesting. And what you can see here is that if prices to continue to play out like this fractal, I'm not saying that it will, but I am going to keep this fractal here as a reminder that if price does play out like this, and it is a pretty boring September for XRP, what we should expect during the later stages of the cycle is for XRP to actually have the majority of its move and get quite parabolic towards the end of the cycle when Bitcoin's actually putting in its top. Now, my reasoning for this isn't because I am more bullish on Solana and Ethereum right now than I am on XRP. It is just simply how XRP has played out in the past. And the first thing I want to show you is that when Bitcoin actually broke out from its highs here set on the left in 2017, we can see that during this time in 2021, this is when we've seen the first initial pump up and move for XRP. So we know that XRP does like to break out when Bitcoin breaks out into a new all-time high. And even if we have a look at how things have performed so far this cycle, when Bitcoin did break out and set that new all-time high in November is when we've seen XRP break out. So just like 2021, when Bitcoin confirmed its breakout into the new all-time high, we did see XRP rally at the exact same time. However, the second part of XRP's rally in 2021 wasn't until Bitcoin was basically putting in its top, and it was right at the end of the market cycle. You can see that XRP, as Bitcoin climbs up through this stage, and a lot of the other altcoins like Solana and Luna and Ethereum back in 2021 actually did quite well during Bitcoin was moving up here. You can see that XRP, which is in the blue, didn't break out from this long range that it was in until right at the very final stages here, and that during this move here for Bitcoin, which lasted about 11 days when Bitcoin only pushed about 13% higher from this level, is when we've seen the final stage of the XRP bull market, where it did shoot up quite high in a very short period of time. And this is where I actually have pulled this fractal from. So we'll be keeping an eye on this to see if XRP is going to react like it did back in 2021, where it didn't really do anything and a lot of the other altcoins took the show. But in those very final stages, when Bitcoin actually set its top, this is when we've seen XRP set its top. And that essentially was the end of the market cycle for XRP and Bitcoin. But like discussed earlier, in this 702 Fibonacci retracement that Bitcoin ends up doing here that finishes off the cycle is when we've seen a lot of the other coins actually top. And if we put Ethereum on the screen here, we can see that Ethereum is here in the orange, and that while XRP actually goes from these lows here to setting its top at the same time Bitcoin tops, this entire time all we see is Ethereum just continue to grind to the upside. And it wasn't until this moment when Bitcoin comes crashing down, XRP comes crashing down, that during all of this is when we've seen Ethereum actually go on, shoot all the way up and set that final 5-wave parabola, which ended up marking its high, which all happened in Bitcoin's retracement. And if we remove Ethereum here and we add Dogecoin, you can see that during this very final stage of the market cycle, Dogecoin did play out very similar to the way ETH played out during this stage when Bitcoin and XRP had topped, and then Bitcoin goes in for this 702 Fibonacci retracement level here. If we remove XRP, you can see that quite clearly Dogecoin has its first move at the same time and then goes on and sets new highs at the same time Ethereum sets new highs and has that final move of its bull market, which all ended up happening as Bitcoin was just going in for that 702 fib retracement. Meanwhile, XRP at the exact same time was also going in for that retracement. So if things are to play out similar to the way they did in 2021, which so far this cycle they have, it's most likely that we see XRP and Bitcoin's top come in at the same time, and that during the short term, while we do see Bitcoin grind to the upside and eventually set its high, and we continue to see things like Ethereum take center stage here and also continue to grind up higher, it's most likely that during all of this, we see XRP just slowly grind back to that previous high that it set back in July, before then exploding right as we see Bitcoin come in for that top. But like touched on previously, for a lot of the altcoin market, this wasn't the top. And actually, like we can see here on Ethereum, the top ended up coming in during Bitcoin's retracement. So guys, the reason I'm showing you all this is because this is what I'm monitoring here behind the scenes. And that if we do see things continue to play out like they did in 2021, which would point to Bitcoin and Ethereum continuing to grind to the upside, while we see XRP continue to form this accumulation structure, then it's going to give us a pretty good indicator of how this market is going to continue to play out, which will allow us to capitalize on different coins at different times in the market cycle and help tell us when it is time to actually start to close out of some of these different altcoins that we are in long positions for. But one thing to note is that none of this has ended up playing out yet. We haven't seen Ethereum go into some kind of parabola. We haven't seen XRP go into any kind of parabola, and we are currently still just waiting for Bitcoin to confirm this bottom here, which for me is a move back above $112,000. We want to use this resistance now as support again, and that if that can happen, it's most likely that we will see price breakout for Bitcoin into a new all-time high in September, taking the altcoin market with it like it did back in 2021. So guys, bit of a different video today. I definitely don't think we have seen the top of this market cycle, as I just haven't seen any indications of how prices played out in the past play out on today's current price chart. So I wanted to give you guys a little bit of a behind the scenes insight on how I am monitoring this market and looking to trade the altcoins during a time where things can be pretty chaotic and pretty confusing if you don't know what you're doing in the market. But the more and more I look back to 2021, I do see similarity after similarity of how price is playing out. And even if we have a look here in the blue, this is Kronos, the coin that we touched on last week, which we've just seen break out, shoot up about 150%. Look at when it did this in 2021, right towards the end of the market cycle, when Bitcoin was in those final stages of putting in its top, which coincidentally was at the exact same time we actually seen ETH near its previous all-time high that it had set back in 2018. And that once Ethereum did break out and backtest, this was the same time we've seen things like Kronos actually explode. And this was all in the final stages of the market cycle here for Bitcoin. And now we are seeing price play out quite similar in today's market, as we now have seen Ethereum edge back to that all-time high, just like it did back in 2021 before it grinds here and then ends up breaking out and backtesting. Right as we see Bitcoin showing signs that it is putting in that top, as we have seen the Bitcoin dominance break down and a lot of altcoin outperformance. And now right on cue, we see things like Kronos actually explode to the upside, similar to what we've seen during the late stages of the 2021 cycle, which points to the fact that there is a lot more juice in the market and we aren't at that stage yet where things are going to break down and it's over. It's just a matter of seeing Bitcoin get back above that $112,000 level, hold it as support before moving up, that the rest of the market participants will start to believe the fact that we are going to continue the bull market. So right now, as we wait for that to play out, I'll keep you guys updated on how everything's playing out. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below. If you enjoy this style of content, feel free to subscribe. I'll keep you guys updated with more videos. And if you have any questions, drop them down below in the comment section. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.